Hey guys, Byron here, wanting to do a video for you on the topic of timelines as it was suggested a couple of days ago. I thought this was a great one to maybe start with and explain what timelines are and how they come into play with our own personal and spiritual development as well as our work with other people. Some of you will possibly have experienced an unusual relationship to linear time the more you open in your spiritual awareness. We can experience all sorts of strange things, everything from kind of time jumps to loops to deja vu to feeling a capacity to write or even rewrite a timeline or even cancel a timeline for ourselves or for other people. Time becomes a very unusual animal the more we open up to our awareness of multidimensionality and our greater spiritual self. So back in human terms, it's a good idea to understand a little about how that time works then, so we stop freaking out about it and it stops freaking us out and we can be of use to ourselves and other people. So I'll explain it as I know it and as I work with it, and we can sort of take it from there. So we live in a material space for the sake of argument. Let's call it 3D. And we realise that that is physical, that is matter and made of substance, or at least it appears to be that way. And the fundamental laws, the fundamental rules of 3D are time, space, and polarity, or duality, or opposites, whatever way you want to look at it. So one of the laws of 3D is time, and we mean time in a linear sense. So here, now is the now moment, but we also have a then, as in back then, past, and a when that will happen in the future. So our time references is really in terms of 3 points. We have now, then, and when. And of course, clock time and all other forms of time just follow this sense of linear progression with time, that we have come from somewhere, we are here now, and we are going somewhere else. Space is a little bit the same when you understand that space is just our ability to say here versus there. I am here, you are there. Space is our capacity to refer to something beyond ourselves or outside of ourselves. If there was no such thing as space, there would be no other. So there would be nothing to talk about and no one to talk to about it. That's an interesting concept, isn't it? But time is a little bit the same. If we remove the ideas of then, as in past, and when, as in future, therefore we are in one gigantic now. Everything must be now, if there is no such thing as a reference to time other than the present time that we are in. Which means that anything that we call a memory, anything that we can reflect on as something that we believe has happened in our past, in the same way as things that we can possibly precog, that we can preconceive or have an intuitive sense that might be coming in the when, in the future. If there is no such thing as linear time, or if there is, but it's only a construct like a frame that we've put over our awareness, if we remove the frame of time, the now, then, when frame, we just pick it up and take it off. The content that is left in one big now. There's no here and there. There's no what's going on now versus what happened then, what will happen when. It's just one big now. So it's helpful to see time, linear time, as a almost structure that has been imposed over what is effectively just a big, fluid, messy ocean. And we've done it to be able to compartmentalise and to divide one thing from another, to be able to refer to one thing as different to another, or to refer to something as different to ourselves, including experiences, people, all of that sort of jazz. So in terms of time, it's worth starting to think or become aware of the structure overlaying our awareness of our sense of time. And that, yes, that structure is very real, and as we work within that imposed structure, then our experiences of time as a past, present, future will also, of course, be real. The point is the structure real? And The answer to that is, from all of our collective understandings, yes and no. Yes, it is real while it is real and we are in it, but it can be removed, meaning we can have an awareness of time or a sense of time that is nothing to do with linear time. And we can work with things that we perceive are caught in time that are not caught in time. So it starts to open things up a little bit more in our thinking in that way. So let's use a practical example in terms of writing or rewriting a timeline and how that could work. So if we use the linear time kind of structure, that we have come from somewhere, we're here now and we're going somewhere, that it works in that kind of line fashion, then anything that we can remember back from this moment, back to the time that we were born, or past lives or whatever, anything that we would call a memory, is effectively an experience that we are also having now. We call it a memory because we are imposing the time structure on that aspect of ourselves. And so because we impose time on it, we then perceive it as something that has happened in the past, a time reference. But of course, if we remove time completely, then what we perceive as happening in the past or has happened already is all happening now. It is still happening right now. It is present right now by virtue of you connecting with it, reflecting on it, thinking about it, engaging with it, all of that sort of stuff. If it is a present thing that you can think of now, even though you call it a memory, it means that it is a now experience. It is a present time, very real experience. It takes a bit to get your head around the idea of that until we start looking at it in practical terms. So for someone, for example, many moons ago, who made a really appalling decision in their life, and since that time, certain events, of course, certain consequences have occurred based on that decision. They made a choice and then someone reacted a certain way, that person then reacted back, certain events happened in their life, so on and so on, at a year, at a decade, and a linear string of events, a sequential string of events have occurred from that original choice. So we can see where a particular event in our life, a particular trait or a behaviour or whatever, we can see where that's come from if we choose to trace it back to an original point or an origin or source of creation, a source of decision. So it's fair to say that our life as we know it now, a good chunk of it, will trace back to a particular point in our life when we chose whatever it was we chose, which has eventuated into what it is we see now. Stands to reason that if we chose something different back in that time, if we made a different choice, then there would be different consequences, there would be different resulting life course as a way from that. So of course, if we were to rewrite a timeline back at its source, then everything that would have happened from that time up until now will need to adjust and readjust. Does that make some sense? Think about that in terms of healing. So 10 years ago, someone made a really bad decision that has caused them immense pain and immense trauma in their life. And that has gotten them to this point where they're here today in immense pain and trauma as a result of that original decision. Now, the thinking is, if of course they made a different decision back in the time, then different events would have occurred and they would be in a different position, an emotional position in life right now. So if we were to, say, go back in time and rewrite that moment, then it stands to reason that everything that would have happened, the conditions that would have eventuated from that particular choice, will now need to come into play and now start coming into fruition and into our life and manifesting. And the things that we have manifested from a choice that we now relinquish, that we now dissolve and let go of, those things and people and events that have happened as a result of that will of course need to dissolve. They will need to disappear to make way for the new timeline or a different timeline that we are imposing. So we need to do that, obviously, from the point of creation, from the point of where that timeline started. We can't really recreate now in this now moment if what we perceive as this now moment coming from somewhere else. We have to affect the somewhere else point to have an end effect or an end result on our now moment. So in theory, if we go back in time, let's say to that point where there has been that trauma, that major serious event in time, and at that time we now make a new choice. We relinquish that decision and we let go of all people and events who have been tied to that ever since. We let that go and allow in that moment ourselves a chance to create a new choice, to make a new decision about how we would like to proceed ahead. If we do that, the theory is, of course, that as we get back into this now moment, it will begin to clear. Anything that has been, I guess, pseudo-imposed in our road will begin to clear, and anything that is meant to be in our road as a result of that choice will start coming into play. So, quite often people who do have timeline adjustments or rewritings will notice sometimes some quite radical changes in their life. And it can be people who have been in their life for a really long time suddenly don't have a place anymore, and they start really disresonating or just disappearing completely. Other people, new people, will come in seemingly out of nowhere. Different behaviours may begin to change. Old rooted behaviours might start to ease up a little bit with their hold, or new behaviours might come into play. All sorts of things can happen, and you really can't determine how a timeline change is going to impact the present moment. The point is just to understand that, of course it will. Of course it must affect the present moment and even your identity, your sense of self. Rewriting that timeline at a point back in what we conceive as the past is how we impact the present. That's working with time, using the tool of time almost against itself. Remembering that even though we think we're working on something from 10 years ago within the time frame structure or the time lens, we're actually working on something right now. It is a present moment or a now time, real-time experience that we are working on. We just apply a time lens so we perceive it as in the past. Remember that the same principles apply for the future as well. Just because we say the past has happened and we call it a memory does not mean that in the same principle that the future is not also presently occurring in this moment, and that we cannot also tap into that as much as we can tap into something that we call a memory. See, we validate memories because we say, well, it was real, it happened, I have a picture in my head of it, I was present, all of that sort of stuff. So that validates reality to us. But the point is that if time is just a construct or an overlay, then it will apply to both past and future. It can't just apply to the past. So that means that all time is now time. There is no such thing as then or when or was or will be. There is just happening now. Really try and get your head around that. If you can, it will lend you more creative power than you possibly realised that you had, and it will dissolve blocks and obstacles in your thinking faster than you can imagine. It is our adherence to time that very much gets in the way of our capacity for healing and quantum healing, which is our birthright and is within our ability to achieve. The idea of spontaneous healing or instantaneous healing pays no attention to linear time. It's not interested in that. I am unwell, I am going to get well, therefore there is an A and a B, and I have to move from A to B. There is a line of time, and I am leaving A and I'm going to B. If there is no line, there is only B, with an experience of A, or maybe only A with an experience of B. The point is that there is no such thing happening in the past or in the future. It is still now. So try and keep in mind that time is a structure, an overlay, which of course is real, and when we are within the overlay, our perception of things via that overlay is very real. But if the overlay can be removed with an experience deeper than the overlay, then the overlay is only real as much as we allow it and choose for it to be so. And there's nothing wrong with that. Believe me, functioning in a purely multidimensional way in 2017 in today's society will do your fucking head in. We need to have some comprehension and a little bit of grounding in linear time so we can function in our day. I assure you, from basic communication to interaction to just planning anything at all, requires you to have some grounding in this linear time structure. But it's good to remember that it's just like a diary or a calendar. We might rely on it heavily, but it is not the core truth. And as long as we remember that distinction, then we have a much easier time in impacting and affecting things in what we see as time. Hope that makes some sense. See you guys soon. Blessings.